Welcome back or welcome to the Softest Timeline podcast. In September 2025, the whirlwind of September 2025, I heard that astrologically, planet Earth is apparently moving from a long cycle being working in the elements of earth and water and now moving into a phase of air and fire. So everything is starting to happen faster, quicker, and more intense. And regardless if you think astrology is real or not, we can probably agree that speeding up and getting more intense is definitely the vibe of this year. So a few days ago, this actually became quite symbolic for me because my hair caught fire and my hair burned in a candle and I had to cut a good 6 centimeters or so. So I'm glad that not more happened because the fire really is so fast and so merciless that I really feel lucky that not more happened. But I really wanted to tell you this because the topic we talk about today is very connected to noticing the elements around us, earth, air, fire, water, ether, and working with the elements around us. And the topic today is Ayurveda. Ayurveda. Because I'm actually going to start more Ayurvedic counseling sessions, and therefore I'd like to share a bit more about Ayurveda for everyone who's interested or who has maybe never heard about Ayurveda before, and also who's maybe interested in learning more about their own Ayurvedic constitution and or is interested in feminine form of Ayurveda and holistic health. So if you're someone who has tried many health trends and modalities, but still feels that something is missing and that there's something you just can't quite get about yourself and haven't looked into Ayurveda yet, this might be interesting and hopefully helpful for you. So Ayurveda is generally a holistic health, healing, and well-being system that is very solid with thousands of years of practice in India, South Asia, and from what I have had the opportunity to experience and learn, it really works. It does really work. And I do believe that literally anyone can benefit from looking into Ayurveda and learning about it and applying it. And there are different approaches to Ayurveda or ways that Ayurveda is used. And I'd like to share about that today, what Ayurveda is generally and why I believe that everyone can benefit from it and how I like to apply it and why I like to support people in starting their journey with Ayurveda. So, yes. So let's talk about one of my favorite topics. So if you like the podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe. So what is Ayurveda? Well, there's so much information everywhere about Ayurveda today, and yet I know that many people that practice Ayurveda find this question quite difficult to answer because Ayurveda is such a vast and complex system that is often hard to explain in one sentence or in one fast answer. Well, translated, Ayurveda means Ayur, life or longevity, Veda, knowledge or science. So Ayurveda means science or knowledge of life. Basically, Ayurveda is an ancient science about how to be healthy in all aspects of life, or in other words, how to thrive as a human being on planet Earth. And the Ayurvedic system is more than 5,000 years old. And as a medicine tradition, it includes and describes preventative medicine as well as curative treatment. It's also often called the sister science of yoga. They are like two systems that complement each other. So yoga is the path of union, and Ayurveda as a path of balance and holistic system of medicine. It focuses on daily living that restores harmony with nature through food, rhythm, and lifestyle. So as mentioned, Ayurveda originated in India around 5,000 years ago or thousands of years ago, and the knowledge only later was written down in the Vedas, the most ancient scriptures of Hinduism. So in its origin and also culturally, it's deeply intertwined with spiritual traditions. And according to Hindu tradition, the Vedas are describing eternal truth, and divine knowledge was understood by ancient sages through deep meditation and passed on for thousands of years, first transmitted orally from guru to disciple, and only later compiled into the systemized collections. And this knowledge and wisdom has been lived and passed down and cultivated in India for centuries and even millennia. And of course, a lot of it has also gotten lost over the years and also lost in the chaos of modern life and through colonization. But actually, many families and individuals in India today still have grown up with Ayurveda as a lifestyle and as a part of their world and their worldview. And they are the ones that are teaching us and using modern tools to give us in the Western world access to this ancient wisdom. And there are so many ways that every individual can directly apply this wisdom to their own life and well-being, even in modern times. As a medicine practice in India, in hospitals, you can often choose if you want an Ayurvedic doctor or a Western doctor. At least many hospitals offer or integrate Ayurvedic care. So that's how Ayurveda is still rooted in Indian culture. Generally, as a practice, Ayurveda is a holistic health approach, so it includes mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. Although I have heard that even in India, with a more modern and reductionist worldview, there also came a bit of a focus on physical treatment and just treatment in general. And for treatments, there are many different techniques that are used to restore balance and move away from disease, like cleansing, purifying from toxins, building and nourishing, stabilizing. And all the supplements that are given as treatments are natural. Nothing is artificial. Everything is what the planet has given us, for example, herbal support. And in a preventive approach, we use lifestyle as regulation. And then Ayurveda acknowledges that not everyone is the same. So everyone is born with a different blueprint, a different constitution that actually describes your built-in tendencies and how you thrive and how you get out of balance. So there is an individual factor to health that is often not acknowledged to that extent in Western medicine. And Ayurveda really sees that there's not one size fits all approach to health and well-being, to the contrary of many modern health trends and practices, to a point where something that can be medicine and healing for someone can actually cause imbalance and in that sense be poison for someone else in a certain moment. So in Ayurveda, it's actually really important to know your individual starting point, your individual constitution of doshas. Doshas you will always hear when talking about Ayurveda. There's 3 main doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And the doshas are the 3 constitutions that combine different energies and different ratios of the elements: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. So actually everyone is born with a different ratio of elements and energies that correlates or even predetermines to a certain extent our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual attitudes, reactions, and lifestyles, etc. And at the same time, one of my mentors, Niti Pandya, who is an Ayurvedic doctor and grew up Ayurvedically in an Ayurvedic family in India, she always mentions that there are certain universal factors that are good for life, or at least human life generally or universally. For example, eating at the same time every day can help everyone to have a smoother digestion. Now, Ayurveda as an holistic health or medicine science is in its core not an opposition to Western medicine. So we can use Ayurveda and Western medicine complementary. So Western medicine is very important, especially for certain treatments. And Ayurveda today acknowledges that. So it's not like because we are opening up for Ayurvedic knowledge and medicine and practices that we have to exclude Western science. Both approaches and medicine systems play a really important part for modern health. But on the contrary to the often reductionist, materialistic approach of Western medicine, the beauty about Ayurveda is that it's deeply intertwined with spiritual traditions and worldviews and spiritual health. It's founded on the idea of interconnectedness of the cosmos, that Earth is a part of and also its beings are a part of. And the idea that there's a higher intelligence that is guiding or orchestrating life, so also human life. But another part of this beauty is you don't have to be spiritual and believe in God or anything like that in order to practice or benefit from Ayurveda, because it is also scientific and based on thousands of years of proven practice and research. And the interesting thing is that some of what is written and described in the ancient texts, modern science is just catching up on. For example, something like the importance of metabolism and gut health and the microbiome. In Ayurveda, the importance of digestion is described as the digestive fire of Agni. or even something like the benefits of meditation that modern neuroscience is catching up on and proceeding to research. So you really get to think however those people that were doing it back then in the Himalayas, the yogis, the rishis, the gurus, the medicine practitioners, however they were doing it, they tapped into higher understanding of the higher intelligence of nature. So in order to use Ayurveda, we don't have to include the religious, mystical, spiritual part. And even for the most atheist of us, I guess we have to admit that there is a higher intelligence in nature, that all the sciences, physics, biology, metaphysics, are trying to understand and crack the codes as well. And then, as mentioned, Ayurveda as a preventive health and well-being approach using conscious lifestyle health and well-being practices is in itself a more feminine approach. It's not just treating singular symptoms like most of the Western medicine does. It's treating the whole ecosystem of the body, mind, and spirit. I really like the image to compare it to a field where we don't just pull out an unwanted weed, but we look at the whole field to understand the conditions in which the weed was able to grow. And then it's not just about treating the field reactively, but it's also about tending the field so it can be the best nourished and balanced environment that supports only what we want to grow and what we need. And in Ayurveda, we do this by looking at basically everything in your life and see what are the doshas, the elements present, where are they accumulated in nutrition, sleeping habits, exercise, relationships with yourself, with others. How are they present in work environments and energies? And then how can we tweak things and choose lifestyle practices that are more aligned and balanced? And how can we support health in general? For example, with natural medicine such as the right nutrients from food or herbal supplements. Now, when we learn and practice these practices as Westerners, like yoga or Ayurveda, there's another layer that comes into it that we have to take into account. Because as Westerners, we have a special kind of responsibility to not culturally appropriate practices that are and have been deeply embedded in Indian culture. Now, I want to start by saying that every single Indian teacher and practitioner that I have encountered and had the opportunity and luck to work with, every single one of them was happy to share and teach Ayurveda and yoga to Westerners because they see and understand these systems as a universal practice for humans, not just a cultural practice, but as something that everyone, again, interconnected web of humanity can benefit from, humanity as a whole. But in the West, as I like to repeat myself, we often, sometimes even subconsciously, have a colonizer or colonizing mindset. And how this plays out is often that people in the West who did not grow up within those traditions, like Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine or indigenous practices like herbalism and stuff, start discovering those modalities now and start packaging and marketing them in sometimes overly simplified and decontextualized ways, often without honoring the original cultural context, the origin, and therefore disrespecting it. And also without supporting the communities where those practices actually came from. And this can perpetuate colonial patterns, even if it's not obvious. So in a mindful approach, we don't want to repeat colonial extractive patterns, and we don't want to just take and use something for self without respect and acknowledgement for where this knowledge came from. Sometimes when observing Westerners adopting these practices without any reference, you really gotta ask yourself, is it that hard to have a little bit of humbleness for Westerners to acknowledge the cultural background of yoga and Ayurveda and indigenous practices in general? So it is important to use and especially teach in integrity with these teachings and the cultural background that they are coming from. Because these are the very communities that have cultivated and preserved this wisdom, the collective effort that has made it possible for us Westerners to even have access to this knowledge today. What is quite interesting is to see that culturally these ancient practices themselves often overlap in many areas or ideas, such as yoga, traditional Chinese medicine, or indigenous herbalism, which makes sense, right? Because what they all have in common is that they are earth-based, indigenous, collective practices. And probably very early on, colonialism and patriarchy and white supremacy have been destructive to their own European lineages and European indigenous practices like herbalism, like the Celts were practicing, and moving slowly but steadily more towards so-called enlightened practices like reductionist practices like Western medicine. And although many of these practices that we rediscover now from different cultures of the world feel universal and intuitive, doesn't mean we should just take them in actions and words that are rooted in entitlement and extraction, like, in my opinion, many of Western wellness people are doing, unfortunately. But of course, in modern life, as modern humans, we have to reinterpret and twist some things and do some things differently than people did back then in India hundreds and thousands of years ago. We have to because our circumstances are completely different, but not to an extent that the roots and the practices and teachings are either completely ignored or cut off, or even that the practices are becoming exclusive so that marginalized groups are excluded, etc. For example, what happens a lot today with yoga asana, which is cut out from yoga as a whole system and path and tradition, and has been kind of turned into a workout and self-care practice and marketed with these highly clean and modern aesthetics like Lululemon leggings and hostile, clinical, white-looking studios. Even aesthetically, those have nothing to do with the colorful and messy and intense, complex beauty of the land or cultures where yoga is coming from. And of course, today there are also Ayurvedic brands that are using Ayurvedic self-care as a highly commercialized product, which of course is also not all bad. And I also have to admit that I do love many of those products, but I think we can never and should never forget or decenter the origins for integrity. Actually, one of my appreciated teachers, Indu Aurora, she even encouraged us to not be scared to teach yoga or Ayurveda, but to stay aligned and connected with the roots, with the hearts of the teachings. And if we actually take time to study the essences of these teachings, we'll probably not fall into this trap, the trap of cultural appropriation, because we understand the teachings to a deep level and hopefully embody it. And as everywhere, it is so important to find the right teachers and to use our discernment in any given moment. Be mindful of psychological manipulation that is going on through especially social media, because often the real ones are often not the loudest or the ones with the shiniest marketing efforts. So I wanted to quickly share from my personal experience how I went deeper into Ayurveda and why I would like to offer these sessions for people that are interested to work with and start their Ayurvedic journey. So in the past, I had struggled quite a bit with depressive episodes, but also high anxiety and dissociation after an intense COVID infection in 2020, where I had the worst headaches of my life. And unfortunately, headaches have been part of my life since I was a teenager. But by that time, I had already been vegan for years, trying to figure out a way to feel healthy, practicing yoga and trying to be ethically aligned and stuff like that. But there was always this underlying feeling of not feeling like myself, not feeling home in my body. And also as a teenager, I had struggled quite a bit with disordered eating. So after that intense COVID infection, I remember it was a dark and cold winter, as winters in Germany can get quite depressing. So I was at a really, really low point after this COVID infection and suffering from long COVID symptoms. And I was struggling so much internally with high anxiety and depression and dissociation, to a point where I didn't really have hope anymore that the future is gonna be different. And I just really felt like something in my spirit was broken. And I just couldn't imagine to live long with this kind of brokenness I felt inside. So I knew that something had to fundamentally change, or I will literally break. Now, I had seen through social media an ad for a year-long Ayurvedic training that was teaching a feminine approach to Ayurveda. And I didn't really understand what that was. I had known Ayurveda from studying yoga in India, but only superficially. But something in it spoke to me and something gave me hope. So in one of those dark, cold winter nights, I remembered that advertising. So I went to search for it and watched all the infos about it. And then I just had this intuitive hit that I have to do this program. Now, the thing was, the cost was quite high, a good amount of money for me at that time. And that day was literally the last day to book the training. And then it started like a few days after for a full year of training. So I was a little bit overwhelmed in that decision, but I followed my intuition into the unknown and I spontaneously booked the course and I did the 1-year training, and it was the best decision ever. And it did help me to heal myself and find back to myself in so many ways. And I don't know where I would be today without this training. Now, my first training was also certifying us in becoming Ayurvedic health coaches, but I actually wasn't even interested in that. After the training, after I got the certification, I didn't think I want to teach or work with clients. The training was something I had done for myself. And although this school was and is teaching a feminine form of Ayurveda, I personally still had the perception of the medicine framework as something very clinical, very sciencey. And also, I just don't really like to subscribe to one framework or methodology and, so to speak, be the advocate for this framework, because I feel I always change and then I change my perspectives and it doesn't go together anymore because the frameworks often don't change with me. Let me know in the comments if you can relate to that. So I didn't think about offering anything and I just started applying what I learned in practical ways. And honestly, also integrating all the information. But 1 year later, I had this huge urge of curiosity to learn more, and I wasn't even sure of what to learn. Just this deep curiosity. And I had done other like smaller courses in the meantime, but nothing had impacted me so deeply as the Ayurvedic teachings. So after a while of searching and thinking about what to do next, it actually became quite clear for me, and till this day is quite clear, that Ayurveda is one of the most coherent, one of the most stable, one of the safest practices, and that it actually can move with you. And from the beginning, Ayurveda had just made sense to me, and Ayurveda just works. So I did a 2nd year of training, and since then have started to have clients and did many case studies. And I really enjoy bringing people into this world of healing and aligning and understanding themselves better and changing their perspectives. Because once you start seeing the world Ayurvedically, you cannot unsee it. So there's different levels of Ayurvedic practitioners that are working in different ways with Ayurvedic science and teachings. So there are Ayurvedic doctors, which you would especially reach out to when you have diseases or illnesses that already have manifested. And then there are practitioners that are working on the cleanses and treatments and often in like spas and retreats and Ayurvedic clinics. Those are not doctors, but they are clinically Ayurvedically trained in a long training. And they are using healing treatments like panchakarma, Ayurvedic oil massages, etc. And then there are Ayurvedic health counselors and coaches who give lifestyle and treatment recommendations for daily life. Also, my one-on-one coachings are in the realm of coaching. And so what has been really crucial in my own journey with Ayurveda is something that had clicked for me only towards the end of my 2nd year of training. So after almost 3 years of studying and practicing Ayurveda. So as mentioned before, Ayurveda means the science of life. And Ayurveda is a very complex medical system and needs to be studied to be applied correctly. But also what I learned through the feminine approach lens and through practicing Ayurvedic lifestyle practices, it can also be very creative and intuitive and cyclical. And it is understanding through the framework of Ayurveda how different energies interact with each other at a certain point or intersection of time and space. And that can be a potent pathway for us to attune with our inner worlds. It's a way to understand yourself, find clarity about yourself, your body. And in that way, Ayurveda is empowerment and trust in the body's healing abilities and empowerment and trust in you and your connection with your body. And when learning Ayurveda and integrating Ayurveda, you learn by practicing that nothing is wrong with you, that even illnesses and diseases are messengers from the body, which the body ultimately is always striving for balance. And Ayurveda also gives tools to actively move into balance. And it even helps to understand through the constitutions and the doshas your tendencies, your strength, maybe your desires, how and why you naturally interact with the world in a certain way, and also how you naturally tend to go out of balance and how you can go back into balance. And equally, Ayurveda attunes us with the outer world, our environment, because by practicing, we establish a reconnection to nature through Ayurvedic practices that are based on cyclical living, seasonal living, living with the circadian rhythm, ideally consuming local food, direct interaction, co-creation with our direct surroundings, with the sun, the night, the seasons, the elements. In that way, Ayurveda is a pathway of remembrance, of wholeness, interconnectedness, in balance, in simplicity with the natural ecosystems. And I do think that everyone in the modern world can benefit from this. And most needed nowadays are actually the aspects of emotional and spiritual healing as well. Because in Western approaches, we have quite a good focus on the physical and by now also awareness about the mental body, but emotions and spirit are not included in the Western medicine approach as an inherent part of health and well-being. And when we talk about spirit here, in my opinion, if that works better for you, you can replace spirit with heart or soul, your essence. So what your heart and soul yearns for, balance and health, is being in alignment with that. In this health and healing approach, we are remembering and observing ourselves and finding balance by going back into sync with nature. Well, in modern life, a lot of our well-being issues and illnesses are there because we're not in alignment anymore with the higher intelligence of nature. And actually, we're leaning more and more towards technology and AI and all these kind of things. So Ayurveda is just a really practical way to remember and coming back to our natural origin. Ayurvedic coaching session with me, the heart and the soul of these sessions is reflecting and remembering and understanding and finding back on track in alignment, sync with inner and outer world, in sync with our heart's desires. And if you're interested in doing a personalized Ayurvedic session, we will have an evaluation about your current issues that affect your health, your physical issues, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. So then we will know the prakriti, the constitution, the ratio of energy and elements you were born with, but also the vikruti, your current ratio, your current imbalances. And then we'll see what energies are present, and if there's accumulation, which basically almost every one of us has, we can look at how to bring these imbalances back into equilibrium. And because knowledge is empowerment, even after just one of these sessions, you will have more clarity about who am I, where am I standing in my health and healing and well-being journey. You will have practical, clear tools or steps to use to move more into alignment and more into balance. I can make recommendations for lifestyle changes and practices and herbs and resources, and even support you along the way with follow-up sessions if you would like to go deeper in the Ayurvedic journey. And there's even an opportunity to support you along the way with follow-up sessions if you would like to go deeper, or if you're someone who likes to be held accountable. And I noticed that some people have a little bit of resistance against applying Ayurveda because they think applying Ayurveda will request living a life that feels like a diet, or that feels like adding a bunch of rules when we're already burnt out by all the rules and the to-dos of modern life. But oftentimes starting to apply the Ayurvedic, let's say, logic to our lives, rather than radically adding or cutting out things, it actually often means first stripping away a lot of unnecessary health noise from our brains, where we are doing a shift of perspective. But also starting with Ayurvedic practices, we actually don't even have to start with food or work on food at all if that's not something you would like to work on. And implementing Ayurveda as a modern human doesn't mean to completely change our lifestyles, because balance is not perfection, it's a spectrum. And embodying this wisdom in the modern age is also to accept that this framework is now adapted in a highly complex situation for individuals in modern society. So starting with Ayurveda doesn't mean that we have to live like yogis in the Himalayas, unless you really want to. Because balance and well-being is a constant movement like waves, and the constant re-evaluation of using your knowledge to make more aligned decisions that are actually in resonance, and even have fun with the process and healing. And that's why we want to align in the first place, because we want to start to feel better and live with more joy and thrive, right? But in an authentic, embodied way that feels like you, not somebody else and their opinions, not somebody else and their practices or their healing. It's completely you. So it helps you gain clarity and peace from all the crazy health, wellness noise nowadays, that most of it actually it's just marketing trying to make profit that confuses and distracts more than anything. Ayurveda is solid but still flexible, and I love that. So if you're interested to learn more about Ayurveda and this approach of holistic well-being, definitely subscribe to the podcast and stay tuned. And if you're interested to do your own Ayurvedic assessment to figure out your constitution, your imbalances, and learn about practical, proven ancient practices that you can start applying immediately, book a session with me and we'll do that together. And if you feel somebody could benefit from learning about the info I shared today in this episode, or just from Ayurvedic practices in general, please share with your friends and loved ones. And if you have questions, send me a DM or an email, let me know. Until then, thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful day.